what is AI in terms of a learning ecosystem, shared decision making between human and machine, and a continuous process of culture measurement and cultural transformation, as opposed to being a particular service or a particular algorithm or deep learning. Even day before yesterday, Irene, I was reading a Twitter where a popular venture capitalist person was saying that, oh, it's not even AI because it doesn't include any deep learning. And I'm like, okay, Lex. So we obviously have a lot of education to do even within the tech and investment community, right? No, not everything has to be deep learning for us to be able to do pattern recognition. Yeah, there are certain things like object detection where deep learning does well, but I believe that first is separating the hype from the reality. Second is understanding what it is and what it is not. Third, what it can do, what it can't do, and fourth, how to do it. And that's what the book tried to answer.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, what are the common pitfalls? Maybe you saw in organizations, that leaders kind of tend to run after next shiny thing,
I think
figuring. Yeah. Yeah.
that's your number one pitfall, right? Which is, I think, in chapter one I talk extensively, Irene, as you also liked, about don't treat it as a tool, don't treat it as a product, don't even treat it as a framework, right? Think of it as really understanding more about the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. The third part is the most difficult, the unknown unknowns. And that's where datafication, pattern recognition, all of that predictions come in, because they recognize patterns that we humans can't easily. And, you know, one of the pitfalls for the technology itself, there's a lot of work going on around transformers and GPT and various language models and computer vision models, which are all very exciting. But I think one of the key things, Irene, to separate what is important from an R&D perspective, I think pitfall number one is separating what is important from an R&D perspective versus what is important for the business or a business process or a profit and loss team. Maybe you don't need the deepest of deep learning. Maybe you need a regression model to get the answer on pricing, on a best pricing scenario that somebody wants, or a classification model, right? Or maybe using time series effectively, using a bit of unstructured data, leveraging NLP and combining it with tabular data. Maybe that's what you need. So separating the value and the outcomes from the technology is, I think, the most important thing. No amount of deep learning without clear value outcomes and people involvement is necessarily going to be successful. You're not going to be successful just because you tried out deep learning. You're going to be successful because you made other people's work easier, faster, better.
And your customers, right? Your
Your
customers
customers.
happier.
Yep.
So yeah, yeah. So in terms of cool technologies, you mentioned GPT-3, right? We're waiting for next development. We're watching, fun videos that robots now, what they performing every task they were not able to do before. So again, in very practical terms, in enterprise, looks like most people start with virtual assistants, with chatbots projects. So what's your kind of take on what capabilities, right, making the biggest impact now?
The ability to go, it may sound like I'm a bit of a party pooper, but as you know, Irene, I do take a lot of pride in being a realistic technologist and a skeptical technologist, not a fanboy or, somebody who's ridiculously exuberant. Language is very difficult. Language is very difficult for humans to understand humans in certain scenarios. When things like emotion and context are involved, it becomes even more difficult. I would look at the current, I'll put a note of caution here. I would say that a lot of the work is exciting because we are able to make progress in ways that computers were not able to make progress 5, 10, 15 years ago. Which is why I think we are not due for another winter, which is why I think we are clearly in the spring moving towards the summer. So there have been definite things. But The question I always ask myself before somebody tells me that X algorithm or Y is going to change the face of humanity is, if that one X algorithm can beat my 4.5-year-old today in every language test, I'll take it seriously. Otherwise, all we are saying is it's doing very well in a narrow AI task. And that's important. It's very important to recognize and celebrate those tasks. But let's not pretend that because my son can spell a 3-letter word, that now also means that he's going to be Shakespeare. It's a bit too much. Even as a proud father, it's a bit too much when you say it about my son. It's a bit too much when you say it about any algorithm.